This female assassin was extraordinary. Her arms were weak, so she just tied the gun to her waist. She could hit 100 shots with a gun using her waist. She was a semi-disabled woman. With only one gun, she could knock out 3 men at once. It was all because she had killer genes. Her mother Scarlett was a female assassin of a criminal organization. She hardly took care of her daughter because of work. The relationship between the two depended on having a milkshake together occasionally. That day, her daughter Sam ordered a milkshake in the restaurant as usual. She sat down and waited for her mother to finish the task and find her later. But this time, Scarlett was 3 hours late. She came with blood on her hands. Scarlett came to say goodbye to her daughter this time. She had no time to explain why she left. The two had a milkshake together as usual. Scarlett hurried out to make a phone call. Just then, a group of ferocious people came into the restaurant. One of them saw bloody fingerprints and 2 straws on the milkshake. The man sat across Sam without thinking. He asked her fiercely where the woman had gone. Because of her mother, Sam had a lot of courage since she was a child. She was not afraid of the fierce man in front of her. The man looked at her calm state. He got angry and took out his knife. Across Sam's face, he left a long scar. Scarlett saw this scene as soon as she entered the door. She whispered to Sam to close her eyes first. Then there was a burst of gunfire and wailing. When Sam opened her eyes again, the bad guys in the restaurant had been killed. Her mother had gone as well. Sam turned and saw her mother outside the restaurant. She quickly got up and wanted to catch up with her, but she was held by the man behind her. The man's name was Nathan. He was the contact of the organization. Scarlett asked Nathan to take care of her daughter before she left. 15 years later, Sam had grown up. She sat at the old table in the restaurant with a cold face. This was her last milkshake. Today, Sam had joined the organization, embarking on the old path of her mother. Sam had just finished her mission, stitching up her wound at home. Nathan called her on the phone, giving her a new task. It was going after an accountant in the organization. The accountant stole a large sum of money from the organization. Nathan reminded Sam to go to a secret library first, changing her weapons. The next day, Sam came to the library in black. After matching the code with the administrator, she came to a secret passage. 3 older women appeared in front of her. They looked familiar to Sam. After Sam told them her name, it was cleared up between them that they were Scarlett's accomplices. They hadn't seen Scarlett in more than 10 years. It was unannounced whether she was dead or alive. Sam took some books. After changing the weapon, she followed the information, coming to the hotel where the accountant stayed. As soon as the door opened, Sam saw that the box on the bed was full of money. The phone suddenly rang. The accountant, who had just taken a bath, came out of the bathroom. He was caught by Sam. Sam pointed a gun at him. The accountant begged Sam to answer the phone. Sam refused his request. She didn't want to get involved. She didn't know whose phone was it that was so important that he risked his life. The accountant kept approaching her to get the phone. Sam tried to make a phone call. The accountant rushed up to stop her. While wrestling, Sam's gun went off and the accountant was shot in the abdomen. But he still blocked it and answered the phone in pain. It turned out that the other end of the phone was the accountant's daughter. She'd been kidnapped. The kidnapper ordered him to exchange a large sum of money for his daughter. The accountant had to steal the organization's money. The kidnapper on the other end of the phone ordered him to send the money to the bowling alley, or else they would tear up his daughter. Sam wanted to leave with the money, but there was goodwill left in her. She turned back and took the injured accountant to the car. He was sent to the organization's hospital for treatment. Then she assigned a person to go to the bowling alley with a huge amount of money to rescue the girl. Then Nathan called to ask her about the progress of the task. Sam told him about the accountant and wanted to rescue the little girl. Nathan accused Sam of meddling, telling her to take the money immediately. Sam ignored him and hung up the phone to continue her plan. Nathan knew Sam's temperament. He had to order to chase after her. Because Sam grew up with him, he specifically told his men not to shoot, trying not to hurt her. The secretary came in. She told Nathan bad news. It turned out that in the last mission, Sam accidentally killed the son of the local gang boss. The gang boss was looking for someone to arrest her now. To solve this problem, Nathan's superiors ordered him to hand over Sam and give the gang boss an explanation. On one side, Sam just came to the bowling alley. She got a call from the kidnapper, telling her to put the weapons in the box first. Sam placed the items inside the box as required. Just coming out, the 3 men who followed her came. Sam insisted on taking the money to save the little girl. She began to knock out 3 men. But how could the 3 of them be Sam's opponents? She beat them like beating a punch bag. Sam hurried to the designated address to trade. She saw the masked kidnapper and the little girl sitting by. They agreed to put the money and the little girl on the cart. Both sides launched at the same time, hand in money and hand in the girl. The kidnappers got the money and ran away. Sam immediately caught up. Not waiting for her to catch up, the kidnappers started getting in the car. The gunfight triggered a car explosion. The kidnappers were all killed. The money was scattered everywhere. What a bunch of fools. Sam took the little girl to the hospital. Unfortunately, the accountant had lost too much blood and died. The 3 men who were beaten were also in the hospital at this time. They called Nathan, asking him, "Can I use a pistol?" Under the pressure of the superiors, he had to approve to let his fellow men deal with Sam regardless of the consequences. The three men paid a lot of money to bribe the doctor, asking him to inject Sam with drugs, keeping her arms from working properly. While talking to Sam, the doctor quickly picked up the syringe and pricked it into her arms. Sam picked up the pistol and tried to kill the doctor, but she found her arms were paralyzed. She had to let the little girl aside help her tie the knife and gun to her hands. Sam rushed out of the hospital, fighting with the three men. Though Sam's hands were inflexible, the three men couldn't defeat her. She used her hands and feet and turned several times. After the excellent move, she solved three men. Then Nathan called, telling her she had mistakenly killed the gang boss's son. And the organization had abandoned her. There was a danger waiting for her. The leader above made contact with the gang boss. Nathan told Sam's address to the gang boss and told him Sam killed his son by mistake. But the gang boss didn't care if it was manslaughter. He sent his fellows to hunt Sam down. Nathan couldn't bear it. He told Sam the address of the safe shelter. He hoped she could escape. In the elevator to the underground parking lot, Sam wanted to kill the doctor. But the little girl told her to stop and spare him. She obeyed the girl, changing her decision and letting the doctor go. They came to the parking lot. At that time, Sam's hands were still paralyzed. She had to hold the little girl in her lap, letting her master the steering wheel. The two staggered on the road. But before they get out of the garage, the front was blocked by two black cars. The gangsters had come. They picked up their guns and kept shooting at the car. Fortunately, the windows were bulletproof. They parked the car in a corner and turned it off. The little girl was afraid, accidentally pressed the horn on the steering wheel. How couldn't this sound be heard in the assassin's ears? They immediately located themselves and blocked the exit. Fortunately, this car had been modified by Sam and had full horsepower. They hurried out of the parking lot to the safe house. No one thought there was a gangster left behind. Sam took the little girl to the door of the safe house. As soon as she rang the doorbell, a gun pointed at her head from behind her. Sam turned her head quickly. She didn't expect it was Scarlett, who had been missing for many years. It turned out that Nathan knew that Sam's situation was dangerous this time. He found Scarlett. Actually, Sam always blamed Scarlett for leaving without saying goodbye. Scarlett looked at her daughter with red eyes. "That's why I didn't say anything." It turned out that she hadn't left the city for so many years but always secretly protected her daughter. Scarlett couldn't show up. She found out the enemy who killed her husband to avenge her husband. The ferocious people in that restaurant were from a Russian gang. They were connected to the top of the organization. Scarlett killed a big man in the organization. They sent gangsters to get rid of her. Scarlett didn't want her daughter to live a vagrant life since childhood. So she entrusted Sam to Nathan. Sam also understood what her mother had done. The two of them were untying the knot. A figure appeared on the monitor. The three of them just left by elevator. But the moment the elevator door opened, the three were stunned. It was full of gangsters outside. Sam wanted to shoot them all, but her hands hadn't recovered yet. Because of bad control, the power pistol was thrown out. Fortunately, Scarlett reacted quickly, immediately closing the elevator door. They had to go back upstairs to a room. Scarlett turned on the washing machine, getting him in. Inside the washing machine was a secret passage. She opened the iron fence with one foot. The three escaped from the back kitchen of the restaurant. The cooks were all dumbfounded, but the gangsters had been chasing after them. The three had to escape into the library where they changed weapons. This was the base of Scarlett's crew. As soon as she entered the door, Scarlett's three accomplices pointed guns at them. The two sides began to scold each other. At this time, the gangsters had come to the door. It turned out that the scolding just now was greetings within the crew. Seeing the enemy coming, they couldn't continue greeting anymore, taking up their weapons and greeting the enemy. The heavy machine gun kept firing. Looking at the enemy not reducing in number, they had to use smoke bombs. It was convenient for them to end the enemy one by one. These gangsters were not their opponents at all. They defeated them in one beat. Sam's fighting ability was very strong. She easily subdued several gangsters without a gun, but no matter how quickly she solved them, she couldn't resist many people. Scarlett saw the injured Sam beaten on the ground by four men. Watching her daughter get beaten, Scarlett flew up with two pistols to take part in the fight. Four gangsters were killed instantly. After a while, most of the gangs had been solved. Unfortunately, Madeline was shot because of protecting the little girl. The little girl was also captured by the gangs. After the crew cleaned up the enemy in the library, it was too late. Madeline had died. The three buried Madeline. Sam got a call from the gang boss, asking her to meet. She came to the appointed restaurant. After Sam confirmed that the little girl was not hurt, she sat down opposite the gang boss. Looking at the people in the restaurant, at this time, Sam had no idea of resistance. She just wanted the little girl to survive, trading herself for the little girl. The gang boss said Sam killed his son. He was going to give Sam the equal pain to that to make her suffer. They hadn't ended the conversation yet. The next second, Scarlett dressed as a waiter and two accomplices appeared. Scarlett pointed a gun at the gangster's head. The two accomplices also threatened his men with guns. The restaurant didn't allow him to carry guns. All the gangsters came unarmed. They didn't expect Scarlett would put on the waiter's clothes, breaking the rules. Scarlett asked Sam to leave the restaurant with the little girl. The crew took care of these gangsters. The gangsters were unarmed. There were no guns in their hands at all. Scarlett and her accomplices kept moving around with the guns. The restaurant became a bloody battlefield. At the end of the film, the little girl became Sam's apprentice, embarking on the path of being an assassin. One day, a little girl in a neat suit came to Nathan's door. She handed Nathan a note. It said, "Look into your heart." Nathan smiled and was about to ask the little girl. He found a red dot on his chest. Sam in the distance was aiming at Nathan. This was her last warning to the organization. The film has a strong lineup. Lena Headey in Game of Thrones and Karen Gillan, Nebula in The Guardians of the Galaxy, first co-starred as mother and daughter, Angela Bassett, mother of Black Panther, and Michelle Yeoh. 5 good action actresses united. But don't underestimate the meaning of the movie. It was still very emotional. That's all for today. I'm Harry. I'll see you next time.